Welcome to Communication, Connection, Community, the Podcaster's Podcast. This podcast takes a deep dive into modern-day communication strategies in the podcasting space. We chat with interesting people who make the podcasting and speaking spaces exciting and vibrant. We also dive into the podcasting community with news, updates, latest trends and topics from this ever-evolving space. So strap in. It's going to be one amazing ride. Let's dive into today's episode. And just as we get started, don't forget, if podcasting is something that you are curious about, we can satisfy your curiosities here at Podcast Solutions Made Simple. We have many opportunities for you as a real estate professional, coach, consultant, or hey, you know what? If you have an idea for a podcast and you're not sure if it's going to fly, reach out to us. We'll make sure all that information is in the show notes so you can connect with us, so you know not only what it is that we do, but the benefits and effectiveness of having your own show, or even guesting on other shows too, which I've had the opportunity to be a guest on some amazing shows. And we've had some great guests on the show. Today is no exception. We have another amazing guest. We're going to talk about a lot of things, I'm sure, including neurodiversity and breaking the ego mechanism. What is that? Well, let's find out. My guest today is Katherine McCord. She's the founder and president of the people operations consulting firm, Titan Management, and the chief people officer for Previewed, an innovative job board that fires the resume. Fires the resume. Never heard that expression before. An international speaker, which is near and dear to my heart, and the founder of the Neuroverse, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to neurodiversity. She loves to stay busy and further her three missions: integrity, inclusion, and innovation. And we are so blessed she is here today, because with Katherine, it's all about expanding humanity. And I'm glad we have a human on the show today. Katherine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And by the way, I coined the phrase fire the resume. I actually have a whole speech that I give around it. I've done whole educational programs and products actually around this concept. And so it's just something I firmly believe in. Resumes stink and they need to go away forever. So there you go. Fire the resume.
It's not an expression you hear, obviously, because you coined it, right? So when I saw it, I'm like, what is that? So anyways, we're not going to talk about that necessarily today, but I know we have so many things that we want to discuss. Oh, and by the way, we forgot to mention that Katherine is also a fellow podcaster.
I am. And I have a show called Career Launch Live.
We'll make sure those notes for the show are in our show notes, so you can check out her show. But I wanted to jump into the conversation and get a little bit more direction on this concept of ego mechanism. I've spent 25 years in the radio broadcasting world, a very ego-driven business. I know we talked about this off mic a little bit, but I've never heard this term, the ego mechanism. So what exactly is this thing, the ego mechanism?
So it's something that nobody should be ashamed about, because literally everybody has it. It is a built-in defense mechanism in our brains as human beings. And it's part of the brain's need to be correct, because correct equals safe to our brain. And so whenever something is contrary to us or says that we're wrong, anything like that, our brain automatically throws up defenses and says, no, I'm right because. And so the exaggerated example of this is when you see somebody on like social media who is arguing beyond all reason and won't even acknowledge that a good point has been made by the other side, and they're just going, no, 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 no. That's an exaggerated form of the ego mechanism, but we do it every day, even in terms of processing how somebody else's response to something is incorrect. That's who are we to tell them that it's incorrect? That's our ego saying, this is different than what I do not like, because it makes our brain feel unsafe. And so that is the ego mechanism. It's actually part of the fight, flight, or freeze response.
Wow.
And it releases stress chemicals. It releases adrenaline and sometimes incorrect amounts of dopamine. And it creates a very unhealthy body chemistry inside of you. And so it's a very unhealthy process once you get older into adulthood.
This sounds like my Thanksgiving dinner table when when there's so many different opinions coming out and you're wrong. Yeah. And it's just the way you've described it. It's certainly that popped into my head, because it's and I have a family that'll fight to the death. Not literally, but figuratively speaking, that their point is the right way. And I think every family has one or two people in it that will do that. But I didn't realize that it's unhealthy, that because of, as you said, there's that chemical reaction or however you described it. that really can have an adverse effect on our health. But how
And
adverse?
even
Like
you can get
how does it?
addicted to it. You can get it literally addicted to doing this. That's where you get like the Facebook trolls and stuff like that, the ones that aren't bots anyway. It's legitimately people become addicted to this. They wake up obsessed with getting into fights. It's actually a thing. Or your brain also reads that as a bad thing, and then you become completely averse. That's where you also see people become completely averse to confrontation. It stresses them out. They don't like it. Their brain is reading is incorrect, but then they just withdraw. So that's life, right?
So if this can become an addiction, how deep does this go as far as the effect it has on our health and well-being?
It's very deep. So releasing these stress chemicals actually does alter your ability to digest properly. It affects your heart. It can actually affect your allergy response to different things. It's very deep running, not to mention our mental health, right? I mean, if you're just stressed out all the time because so many things are coming at you that are wrong and or that you process is wrong and or that stress you out, it's not a healthy way of being because you're constantly climbing down the Maslow's hierarchy pyramid. And for anybody listening that doesn't know Maslow's hierarchy, it's a long-standing psychological principle, and it has 5 different layers of human need. And the bottom is physiological needs. Then you have safety and security. Then it goes, it goes up from there. Then love and belonging, then self-esteem, and then self-actualization. And you want to go up the pyramid, not down it. But this response makes you slide down it and go back into a more primitive state, which means that you can't work as well. You're going to be less productive at work. You're going to be less productive in your relationships. You're not going to be able to get that closeness and that intimacy. So a lot of times when people are fighting very hard for intimacy and just, they just keep hitting walls, it's because someone or both people in a relationship are stuck further down the pyramid for whatever reason. And this can be one of the reasons. And I love that you started off the podcast talking about curiosity, because that's exactly the solution to this and how to actually break the ego mechanism, because you can tell it, no, thank you, and teach yourself to not activate that response, but instead to ask questions and to respond in a healthy way.
I think that, like you say, because it's an addiction and humans love to do the easier thing as opposed to the more difficult thing. That's why in business, for example, people will want to do the easy tasks, not the hard ones.
Yeah,
And
so
we're also
true.
resilient, reticent to change because change is hard. So you say that this can be cured or managed. Is it easy though to manage it, or is it,
Yes.
do we fall
Yes.
back into those, like even listening to podcasts? I'm sure there are individuals who listen to podcasts that they know get them riled up, and
Yeah. Oh yeah.
it's their narcotic that they have to listen to that podcast
They
that
have to
gets
do
them
it.
riled up, even though it's affecting them deeply. And that's why I'm saying this.
Mhm.
That's why I'm saying podcast, because there are a lot of them out there. That's all they do.
That's what they're geared. Well, actually, it's very simple to learn to manage this. And here's the thing: once you learn to manage it, you don't need to say no. Now, it's never smart to live in something that stresses you out for extended periods, but you get to the point where you can very easily come up to these situations and they don't stress you out anymore. You can decompress, absorb it, figure out your response, and then move on in a healthy way. So you start by learning to identify it. What does that feel like? And for me personally, and everybody kind of has their own response. The second that something hits me wrong, let's just say I do a lot of dog rescue. And so when somebody tells me that they feel like Michael Vick served his time, initial response is murder. But that's not the correct response. So the very first place I feel it is right here above the nape of my neck. And my nerves start to inflame and those chemicals start to flow. So what I did was, when I started reading about this and learning about this, learning how to conquer it, which I did a lot of research in like the National Institute of Health, National Library of Medicine, Harvard, Stanford, a bunch of different like studies and things like that to learn how to take care of it. So what I did was I sat down in my desk chair and I put my hands on the arms, or I would tap my foot, and I alternated these two actions. I would just tap my foot once very lightly. And I taught myself that means I have food in the pantry. I can picture it. I have a roof over my head. I can see it. Nobody is attacking. I can look around. Nobody's attacking me. I am healthy. I have, everything that I need. I have money in the bank. So I taught my brain this. It took me about 5 minutes of getting the pattern and about another 15 minutes of putting it into practice and learning, okay, look at something that stresses me out, do this thing, decompress. And that was the initial run. And then it took me another couple of months of practicing it in live situations to get really good at it. But in just that short time, what happened was I can turn off those stress chemicals. I tell my brain, no, thank you. We're okay. I got it. We're all right. But then the second part of that, you still can't respond combatively because that's going to bring those chemicals right back. So instead, you ask a question and prepare to fully absorb what is going to be said to you. Even if you end up not agreeing with it, that's okay. You can still learn from this. You can still take from this. Something can be gained from this interaction. And so when you go into it with that and you go into it with curiosity and asking questions and going in to understand, not to combat, it completely changes how your brain functions. And it completely actually changes the physiological makeup of your brain and expands it so that you have more information to make better decisions. And then those instances where the ego mechanism flare up become less and less.
I like this. My question is, I have two actually, but my first question is, because it is such an addiction, remind me, I want to come back to this question piece because I have a question about questions. But because this is such an addiction, even if we're taking the steps to control it, do we go through, or have you found that people go through withdrawal and they feel the need to, I'm just going to, especially with, I'm just going to open my Facebook and see what's happening on this one page, or my Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it this week, account. So is it that, do we go through the withdrawal?
Yes. Yeah. Some people do. Not everybody.
Okay.
Not everybody, but some people do. I did a little bit, not too bad. But again, I was addicted. I like that charge. I like that fight, right? My go-to is fight. And those are usually the people that you see clinging to it, usually, are the people whose go-to is fight. And so I did go through that a little bit. But what I started realizing is the more that I forced myself into the curiosity response, the healthier I started feeling. What happens is when you respond in curiosity, your body releases oxytocin and serotonin, which are healthy, happy chemicals that put our body in a better state. And then you become, quote, addicted to that, to feeling good, not bad. So the addiction slowly shifts to something healthy. It's like saying I'm addicted to water. Good.
That's a good addiction.
That's not a bad thing. Yeah.
I'm addicted to being air. I just can't get enough of it.
I can't get enough sunshine. Well, gee, what a terrible problem. Like it's along those lines, right? So it keeps you very healthy. Now, if you're a person who overproduces, you may need to talk to your doctor about balancing that out. But in general, this is a healthy, happy response. And it's something that connects you more to the humans around you. And that's really the remarkable thing, is that you start to, for all the people out there who feel like you don't get other humans, right? Which is a common thing with neurodiversity, which just means a medically visible or diagnosable difference in how a person processes information. So like everything from like cerebral palsy over to autism and dyslexia, over to even the mental health spectrum, like obsessive compulsive disorder or bipolar. And even for folks like that who feel so detached because they feel so different, doing this connects you to other humans, and you're better able to find the commonality. You're better, even when you don't have commonality, you're better able to understand them. You're better able to process what is happening around you because your brain has more information. It's not so limited. So it's not just jumping to crazy conclusions. So we always say, don't assume. Yeah, this is the way to stop assuming.
I like it.
I now by default do not assume. And it's almost annoying, like, because my brain then constantly has 50 million questions in it, which I was kind of born that way. It kind of like took me back to that childlike state. But yeah. So what was your question about questions?
My question about questions. Yes. And thank you for clarifying that part. By the way, I just want to quickly talk about the sunshine addiction. Full disclosure, Katherine is in Florida. So of course she's addicted to sunshine. Which is not a bad addiction to have, like we've already said. My question about questions was, and I don't want you to give away your best stuff, but when we're in this moment where we need to stop, take a step back, and ask questions, can you give us some examples of what some of the questions?
Yeah, like what are the questions to say? Yeah, what are the questions? Yeah, sure. So let's say that somebody says something that you disagree with, like it's just their stance on whatever is something with which you disagree. So say, okay, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I would like to learn more about what you're saying. And then receive it and then keep asking questions. And it can be like, okay, so that, okay, can you tell then what about this? How does that fit into that? And just start really engaging them with the intent of getting to the bottom of it. The idea here is you're just going to dive down the rabbit hole, right? You're just going to go with them. And then what you'll see is people start to naturally reciprocate after a while. If you start it, they just can't help but like, all right, so this is what we're doing. You're engaging with me. This is comfortable. So let's start talking about your thing now. It just kind of becomes a pattern. Another one is, let's say that someone has done something that you read in a way that negatively affected you. And this happens especially within an intimate relationship, whether it's your kid, your partner, parent, whatever. Let's say somebody did something that just really hit you wrong. And you're like, that was wrong. That hurt me. Was it a wrong action though? Like, yes, the result is that you were hurt, but what was their intent? You're assuming, and you may assume intent, like, oh, they're doing that because they think XYZ, or they're doing that because blah, blah, blah. You don't actually know that. So ask, say, hey, you did that and it kind of hit me wrong. Can you talk to me a little bit? Or maybe I don't even like to say it hit me wrong yet. I just say, hey, you just did that. And I'm not sure that I received it properly. Can you talk to me a little bit about your intent with that action? What were you intending? Because sometimes what you figure out, and the same thing if like a statement was made to you, like somebody says something kind of, it seems snarky to you or whatever. Okay, why are you saying that? And even if it was meant snarky, what you sometimes realize is all the things behind that led up to that. I realized at one point that I had been doing something accidentally, completely accidentally, that was difficult for my husband. And because of his different diversities and all that, made things very difficult for him. And so he finally, just like he hit a wall, and was like, God dang it, stop doing this. And that's why it came out snarky. Well, I didn't know I'd been causing all that pain. So by asking the question, we were able to heal that and move on. And then I didn't feel offended anymore. And he did say, sorry, I snapped or whatever, but it was the point of then understanding what's happening. So then it doesn't feel like an attack. So now, for instance, when people get kind of sideways with me, I don't see it. My brain no longer reads it as an attack. It's no longer puts me to fight or flight. Now my body's like, oh, okay, tell me what's going on here. Like my brain's default is, okay, let's figure this out. It's okay. Let's talk about this. We can do this, like we can work through it. And now the rare times that my brain does read something as an attack, I know something is really wrong.
The other thing that I've noticed is, and maybe this is part of the cure or control, is my brain processing it not as I need to react or be upset about this. I need to put myself in the position of the other person and where they're coming from. So understand that they are in this particular geographic situation, or in the example that you gave about things that might happen around your house with those that you love. There's a disconnect because of somebody had a bad day that you maybe haven't realized they've had a bad day, and there's things that are just askew that you don't quite understand unless you ask the right questions. So so that way you're not always in that engagement mode, like the Thanksgiving dinner table where everybody always wants to engage, right?
Everybody's got to engage.
Everyone's got an opinion.
It's true. And come to understand, it's not just about giving grace to the other person where they are, although that is part of it. It's also about you. It's a selfish thing too. You want more information. The more information you have, the better decisions you make, the healthier you are. And actually you're feeding the actual need that your brain has to be correct, because your brain needs to understand. So you're actually, instead of doing the wrong thing and just letting all the frustration out, right? Like letting your brain act like a toddler, you're actually giving it what it needs and giving it the additional information.
I think we could talk about this till the cows come home.
Hours.
But considering it's the work that you do, but I want to make sure we save enough time for finding out more about your podcast. I think the piece about diversity and disability, I think we're going to need to have another conversation down the line about that and do a real deep dive into that, if you're okay with that. So
let's do it.
We'll come back because I think that there's some value in spending time on that. I think we spent a lot of time talking about this and understanding the ego mechanism and really how to nurture this and not let it overtake you and become the addiction that it quite often can be. But I want to find out more about your podcast. So tell me about your show, and how long have you been podcasting?
2020, and it did not start as a podcast. It started as like a virtual event, and then it worked its way to a podcast. So it's been, oh my God, it's been 4 years. Holy crud. It's called Career Launch Live. We have multiple seasons. Some of them are on Spotify, some of them are on, but all of them are on like YouTube and LinkedIn and that type of thing. And it is live, as the name would indicate. And then it kind of will roll over to a podcast like state. It's a blast. We talk all things work, everything from understanding payday law all the way to diversity and inclusion, to communication, to just different leadership aspects. All the things are in there, and it's lots of fun.
And the journey for you, how does it feel now that you're 4 years deep? Those first few episodes must have been, and again, you said they were live, that still must have been a little prickly and like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something live.
I grew up in theater, so it wasn't that weird, and like performing on stage, so it wasn't that weird, but it was a different medium. So that was bizarre, getting used to having to deal with all the tech stuff. Then the lady that originally was helping me with the back end stuff, she got a job again, post COVID. So then I didn't have her. So I did it all myself. And that was a journey. But honestly, now it's just part of my week. Whenever I have a new season, and I do it in seasons, because I do have travel seasons as well. When I do seasons, it's just part of my week. It's no big deal. We have the people on. It's very low stress. And my guests have gotten to the point they're like, this is just so comfortable. I'm just talking to you. It's just me and Kat having a conversation. Like, yeah,
and that's the way it's supposed to be. It should sound like we're just sitting, having a conversation, sitting on your couch, sipping our favorite beverages and just chatting like old friends. That's the way, in my opinion, anyways, even a business podcast should sound just like a conversation. It shouldn't be all formal. It should literally, it should sound like what we've been doing this last, 20, 25 minutes or so.
I agree.
You have some valuable resources that would be of great interest to your audience. So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So number one, you can find all kinds of resources on the Neuroverse website, which is jointheneuroverse.org. And Neuroverse is spelled just neuro and verse. And there's all kinds of cool resources on there, including about communication. There's different coaches and all that, especially if you fall into that neurodivergent category. And then also you can go to my speaker site and you can book me for podcasts. You can book me for different speeches, different classes, all the kind of fun things, learn a little bit more about me, see pictures of my life, kmccordspeaking.com.
Just book Katherine.
Do it. I'm pretty awesome.
Book Katherine.
I'm pretty awesome, to be honest.
We only have awesome people on this show. Katherine McCord, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. This is not the last time. This is not the last time. I'm guaranteed we will be speaking again. And by the way, I have to thank the lovely and talented, like he doesn't get enough accolade already, Alex Sanfilippo, for joining us together through his lovely platform called Podmatch. I don't know if that gets me any extra bread at the dinner table.
I feel like it should, but yay, Alex.
The number of times I've said his name in public, and I think I should definitely be paid a royalty for that for sure. But anyways,
I have a few companies like that I'm like, guys, seriously.
Come on. If I butter your bread anymore, I won't have any bread for me. But anyways, it's a pleasure, because I have to admit that, Katherine, you were my first guest through the Podmatch platform. I spent so much time guesting with Podmatch, and now that all the plugins work the way they should. Technology is a weird thing, a fun thing and a weird thing when it doesn't work right. Now I'm in the hosting chair as well. So thank you for being the first guest on Podmatch guest on the show.
My pleasure.
So it's been a pleasure chatting with you. So, but before I turn you loose on the world to go either record another podcast or help people figure out the ego mechanism, what's your final thought?
My final thought is learn to experience true intimacy through responding in curiosity. Because when you do that, when you engage and you break that ego mechanism and you respond in curiosity and you actually receive what people are telling you, it actually changes your neural pathways in your brain, and the way that your brain functions actually grows and expands. And what could possibly be more intimate than letting somebody change your own mind? So I encourage you to embrace true intimacy, to embrace responding in curiosity, and to grow exponentially. It will change your life and it will change your career in all the right ways.
That's a great place to leave it. Katherine McCord, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us today. Special thanks to our producer and production lead, Dom Carrillo, our music guru, Nathan Simon, and the person who works the arms, all of our arms actually, my trusty assistant, Stephanie Gafour. If you like what you heard today, leave us a comment and a review, and be sure to share it with your friends. If you don't like what you heard, please share it with your enemies. Oh, and if you have a suggestion of someone who you think would make an amazing guest on the show, let us know about it. Drop us an email, askcarl@carlspeaks.ca. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter as well. You'll find all those links in the show notes. And if you're ready to take the plunge and join the over 3 million people who have said yes to podcasting, let's have a conversation. We'll show you the simplest way to get into the podcasting space because after all, we're podcast solutions made simple. We'll catch you next time.